everybody? Welcome back to the Meltdown, episode 11 with me, Llama77, and that guy over there, your boy QQ. How we doing this morning?
Yo, what it do? We're recording a day late, an hour early, or maybe just a day late. I'm not exactly sure. I'm excited, man. We're in the middle of the week here still. ALGS LAN just got wrapped up. We're, I guess, officially halfway through the split, if you think about it, for RLCS, and the fact that we've got split number 2 or qualifier number 2 of split 2 for NA this weekend, and then moving on from there. So good time. I feel like we've been saying it a lot, Llama. I feel like we really have. Great time to be alive for some esports, man.
It really is. And honestly, the Apex LAN, a ton of fun to watch. I mean, you talk about the new season as well. We got a new legend. We've got the solo fun we got to have as well. So it was really good. Unfortunately for Apex, we do have to wait 3 weeks until we start back up. So it's going to be a little bit of time until we get some more Apex play.
Yeah, but you think about it, though, for having just had a LAN that finished on the 5th, that's what, 4 weeks for regular season play. That's really not too shabby. I think, when we talk about, when we look back, episode 4, 3, we were talking about not having that big of a gap between the LAN for VCT and the start of the season. I feel like Apex does have themselves a nice little balance. But let's talk about that ALGS LAN, because while I didn't get to watch as much of it as I thought I was going to, mostly because I was busy doing some RLCS stuff across a couple of different regions, I did get to watch the match point finals on Sunday. I got to watch a little bit here and there throughout the rest of the weekend. One really good, great final, or great stuff through the beginning from to the end. But the finals, those 8 games, banging.
Yeah, I think I said this before, but this is the best finals I think we have had up to this date. It was one of the most competitive. We had a lot of different regions involved. And I think even looking back, I was one that actually watched almost every single game. I watched all the way through groups, watched all of it, had it up on my side monitor. And we both had down that Dark Zero, again, from North America, looking absolutely dominant.
They were looking dominant. Not just that. I think the big thing for me when you talk about the finals, there was no team that jumped out to a huge lead. So the finals, amazing, right? Like the fact that there was never like okay, as long as these guys win, they've got a huge lead, they're fine. Like no one jumped out to a huge lead, but Dark Zero from beginning to end, breaking records. The group stages, like the points in group stage, it's almost laughable. When you look at the points that they had, 248 through their 3 group stages. Second place was Aurora, 158. A 90-point difference through 18 games is insane.
That's crazy. And they also pulled up the statistic that they could have only played their final 6 games, and that would have been enough to qualify them for the finals as well. So it just shows you really, really consistent team. And it felt like as well to me, like they scored more points every single time they played. It felt like they were heating up, they were finding their groove, and like everybody was asking, is this just a group stage thing? Because there are always those teams that are like, okay, maybe it's our first LAN, we want to play a little bit safer, we want to make it those finals days. Dark Zero seemed to maybe exploit those teams. The question was it going to happen in finals? It looked like they had that consistency there too.
Well, especially because you win the 3 games back to back to end group stages, right? And then to start off winners bracket, where it's going to be the most competitive the lobby should be up until before grand finals, you win game 1 of that too. The first time it's ever been done, technically winning 4 games back to back across, of course, 2 different days, because it was the group stages and then that winners bracket round 1. But that just shows how impressive Dark Zero was all weekend long, man. They put on an absolute clinic, Llama.
They did. And it was kind of expected, right? This was continued momentum from the home North American region, right? That they took it, they found success, they went to playoffs, and then they did the exact same thing. So I think it was, even though they scored, record amount of points and like had this super good performance, I don't think anybody wasn't expecting this.
No, I think it was kind of expected. I would even say for some people who are paying attention, the surprise and the fact that APAC North finally got a winner, I don't think people were surprised at who came from APAC North, right? Reject Winity's been one of those teams. And what's crazy is they played obviously not as consistent as Dark Zero. We talked about that big gap through group stages there, right? But when you look at Reject Winity, they were a team that even through group stages finished 5th. They finished at, I think, first in the winners bracket as well. And they just seem to never be on broadcast. I'm not sure if that was just, again, nobody really knows that much about them, so it's hard to build hype around them. But they were another team that was consistent from beginning to end.
And it felt like quietly, right? That they weren't like this Dark Zero team that was like, okay, they're shouting from the rooftops, we're the best team around, we're making all these flashy plays. They were just calling zones correctly, making good decisions, and slowly working their way up the ladder. And I think from an APAC team specifically, that's nice to see, even though like you said, it's not a big surprise to like me or you that have been watching, but like it's nice to see another region find its success.
Yeah, I mean, there was always this wonder of, oh, well, who's going to win between Dark Zero and TSM, right? There's the two LAN winners that we've seen this whole time, and technically from North American APAC South, right? But now we've got a new region, APAC North, and I think a region that has not quite gotten the credit that it deserves. Just in its fandom for Apex Legends, it's a huge community over there. I think part of the reason it doesn't get its credit is because a lot of the online viewership isn't on the normal vehicles, right? It's not you don't see a lot of viewership over in that region on Twitch. You don't see a lot of viewership in that region on YouTube either. So for us, ignorant Americans, right? We're like, well, where's all the people who are playing it? We just don't see it. But the fact is the viewership is huge over there. And I feel like we've seen the gap close, not just even in APAC North, but I would argue across the board in multiple regions. And I kind of had a question for you looking back at this last finals, because I would agree it was probably my favorite finals that we've seen in recent history. I mean, it was close throughout. Do you think that NA's gotten complacent? Because when you look at the final score, we had no NA teams in the top 5. I mean, you had Reject Winity, you had Dark Zero, Fnatic, right? Like, you have no North American teams that are in the top 5, but it's supposed to be the best region in the world.
So this is where I'm going to argue you, Q. Okay, for Dark Zero, you say, okay, they're not North America. I gotta say they're North America. I think this is my argue point that I by the way have made since the beginning of time. I think any team that goes to North America, you look at somebody like Moist, you look at somebody like Dark Zero, North America made them. Sure, they're from the other region, but the good enough play in North America increased the skill level, let them get to that point. So I don't think Dark Zero would be where they are without being in North America.
So they weren't world champs before coming to NA?
No comment.
And the other thing is, even when you look at Moist, this is a team that has been on the cusp multiple times. And look, I get it, man. You see all these people who are like, oh, well, they picked up NA rollers, right? They did pick up some pretty solid players, right? But let's say Dark Zero were to disband all of a sudden, right? And then, I don't know, TSM picks up Jen Burden. Is that all of a sudden an APAC South roster because they have one APAC South player? No, the copium from NA is absolutely astonishing, especially, and look, again, I'm not going to try and discredit the players that were picked up from their rosters, Sykes and Guild respectively, right? Yeah. But what did they do before they joined the APAC South teams? What, like, in year 3, what were their results? Don't worry, I'll wait. We can wait here all day. They joined the APAC South teams, and then they were made into the monsters that we now see in year 4. And it's no discredit to them, right? It's just, I think when you look, one, especially at Dark Zero, when you do have Zero and IGL that probably hasn't gotten the credit that's been deserved because, of course, again, the North American script has always been Sweet or Imperial Hal, right? Almost completely discrediting Zero until he won yet another LAN. But for me, I just feel like when you hear all of this hype around NA, you wonder if the complacency is there. Because again, the two teams that were at the top, granted, they are North American squads, but they don't but they aren't like your traditional North American teams, right? And then when you look below that, I mean, it wasn't until 7th? Is that right? Yeah, 7th for Cloud9, Disguised in 9th, and LG in 10th. You have 3 NA teams below that. And then it's like, it's kind of a mix of the rest of the other regions. It just feels like there was not as much of a show. I mean, TSM finished 17th, dog. Like,
yeah. I just feel like I've been saying it all season long. I don't think TSM got a grasp of the meta. I don't know if it was like Raven couldn't get a good read, or maybe it's the comfortability factor that like maybe they aren't comfortable playing Bangalore, Caustic, whatever, and they just couldn't find their marker. But I feel like they have the good macro, and that's why they made it to finals. But like, they never could get a good grasp on the meta. And I feel like at this point, if you're TSM, like, you got to make something new. Like you were one of the first people to get invested in that Valk meta. Like create something new, create something that's going to work for you. Don't just like copy what everybody else is doing.
Well, it's interesting, right? Because all of a sudden, Roster Mania has officially started in NA, but only in the sense of all these cryptic tweets. I think the only thing that we really know, of course, is that Sentinels is leaving. So that means Koifel and those players are free agents. But we haven't seen the first domino fall as far as who's going to pick up, right? And then there are these rumors that TSM is looking to make the change, not just in the coaching position with Raven, which we have already seen happen, but we're even seeing cryptic, kind of GIF. Maybe is it farming for impressions from Hal and Verhulst and reps and a post from Verhulst, or we also have the Miami Heat Big Three getting posted by Zero, which makes you wonder, is one of the TSM players maybe joining over there at them? Especially think about the fact that the CEO goes and joins up with Sharky. Like, that would be insane.
Does that mean Hal's LeBron?
Bro, LeBron didn't win anything before he joined Miami Heat. All right. Hal's the CEO. Okay. If anything, Hal is more Wade than LeBron, but that's a whole topic for another story. We'll keep it to an esports topic over here. But it is going to be interesting because I wonder, as far as for them, who is the pickup? Because we have seen that it looks like they're going to make a move, and Jen Burton, Zero, they're going to be staying together. Usually the duos, they kind of do, especially when you still have good performances like we did see. Like good performances like we did see Dark Zero have this last LAN, right? But then you wonder, do you pick up someone like a Hal? Do you pick up a Verhulst? Or do you do what Zero's done best for a long time, which is just pick up the best high fragging roller free agent, which would be Koifel? So I think there's a lot of options on the table, but I think you do got to consider TSM's most recent past in the sense of they seem to be leaving esports. So what better time to fully disengaged from Apex than finishing 17th.
Yeah. I mean, I will say, like, at the same time, you go back to kind of like that NA complacency, and like you just look at like the overall group stage. I think that you think like it's not panic alarms for North America. You still made a lot of teams into finals. You still had some relatively good performances through group stages, even if you didn't take the win. And those two top teams are kind of from those other regions. I am always of the thought that like you shouldn't make changes. That I think TSM has the cohesion, and like I said, they have really, really good macro. It's just like, do they find something that works for them? Do they make a change at coach? That might be the better, but at the same time, you can't control all the players' moves and stuff. You talk about contracts expiring, things are going to move around. At the same time, everybody's going to want to improve. And for TSM, getting a 17th, even though, okay, you made to finals lobby, sure, that's good for a team that maybe it's their first LAN. You're the 3-time world champion. Like, you can't be getting 17th.
Yeah, especially just in the way that they did it. I mean, just a super quiet day on the last Sunday, right? Just is, and honestly, if you really look back over across the broadcast, I mean, or across the weekend, kind of surprised that they even made the grand finals. Actually, Hal was talking about it on his stream just a couple of days ago, which one, by the fact that he doesn't want to talk about the roster, makes me think that there's going to be some sort of roster moves, whether it's one player or just the TSM disbanding, which we'll talk about in a second. I do think is going to be very bad for Apex, but for reasons people aren't thinking about. But the fact that they have not been you mentioned how they haven't adapted to the meta, and Hal even says they have not been winning their 3v3s for a while in Pro League, which has been their issue. What they have been able to benefit on, one of the things that TSM has always been good about, when they get zones, they are able to capitalize and get themselves the big points that's needed to get through Pro League and put yourself on to LAN. They just weren't having those games the last couple of days, really, when you look at TSM's performance. But something tells me we might have seen the last of TSM and ALGS.
It's possible. I mean, you talk about like their off drops. You talk about the contests specifically. Like, we were listening to some of those columns. They were awkward, man. Like, oh, I'm up on the roof. What do you want me to do? I'm dead. I don't know. Come help me on the low ground. Like, stop sitting up on the roof. Come help me. Let's take a 3v3 together. So, like, you can tell that, like, the cohesion is starting to break apart. They're losing the 3v3 value. So it's got to be something. Maybe it's a change that's needed. But honestly, for the rest of North America, I'm actually really happy with specifically like how Cloud9 and DSG did. DSG, by the way, one technically fight away from winning the World Championship again, but couldn't close it out in a 2v3. But I got to say, like, I feel like these are two teams that everybody going in was like, oh, it's going to be Designful breaking down again. It's going to be Cloud9, this brand new roster. They're not going to find anything. They're going to 3-man die to zone or something again. And, I feel like,
moments.
yeah, Mazer moments. And even though it was a 7-8, I feel like I was really proud with how they did.
Well, one, especially when you look at DSG, this roster still kind of in its infancy. When you're talking about for other rosters, let it cook. This thing's been together, maybe a year at this point with, heading into challengers for Split 2 last year. And you mentioned they have been one fight away twice. That is a tough pill to swallow, but it is to let you know that you're literally on the cusp. And there's really not many places that you would rather be if you are falling off and not getting the dub, right? I think also for C9, when you look at them, another team that didn't exactly get the credit that it deserved at the beginning of this season, has continued to tread their way through, and they also were relatively close. If this goes one more game, they're also on match point and have the potential to be able to be the ones hoisting that trophy. The more I think about it, it really does feel like DZ threw it just a little bit. And it's unfortunate, man, that top 4 scenario for Dark Zero in game 7, getting caught just a little too far ahead and separated. One person goes down. And in that type of environment, that's what one mistake can literally cost you. You hate to see it, but for Dark Zero, I don't think you can hang your head at second, especially with as good of a performance that you had the other 3 days of the tournament as well. I do got to say, though, before we move on from ALGS, I don't think a lot of people realize what might happen if TSM leaves. Because it's not just about an org that's been around. This isn't an OG org that just leaves and isn't going to be around the scene anymore. Llama, what happens to Scrims, dog, if Minus Tempo is no longer getting paid by TSM to run them? You think Wig or Greek is going to be able to run them? No, they don't got the time for that. They're doing their thing. Their mods probably don't have the patience. The rest of the teams, I don't know if they've got. I mean, Minus Tempo has had to have really thick skin the last couple of years to do what he does. And I have always said one of the really integral parts in the glue that helps keep the scene together, because no one else takes the time to push everything and take all these egos and kind of push them aside to be able to get practice done, right? So if TSM is no longer paying him, I know I've heard from interviews with him on other podcasts that he's going to have to find employment, which means now all of a sudden he doesn't have time to run scrims. What happens to ALGS? I think a lot of people aren't grasping this yet. I'm hoping it's just a TSM roster change and not them leaving, because we could be in for some trouble.
Yeah, I hope so too. And honestly, it could be something where EA even steps in and says okay, maybe we have dedicated scrim servers that we can have, because I know LCS, they have dedicated scrim blocks where all the teams in the pro league play against each other, not in official matches, and the league sets it up and gets it going. But at that same time, from me as somebody that has ran lobbies and ran the whole scrim thing, it is very tough, and it is taxing on somebody, and you cannot do that for free for too long. So I will say that it will stink if Minus Tempo is gone, but I think that if TSM does leave, I feel like EA would step in somewhere there.
Only time will tell. Hopefully we at least have a little bit of info. Obviously, you and I, we're going to keep everybody in the loop as much as we know with Roster Mania over the next upcoming weeks. But I'm holding on to hope that we at least get TSM one more split. But I'm going to be honest with you, it's really not looking good. Because right now they're just in ALGS and RLCS, right? They've disbanded all their other rosters?
I think so. I think they have a couple of content creators, and then I think there were rumors that they left the North America League of Legends, but there were rumors that they're waiting for a spot to open up somewhere else. Now, this could be it could be Copium saying oh, they're coming back for sure.
Right,
but
right.
It also is very hard to break into all those other regions, especially for League of Legends.
Well, speaking of RLCS, the other league that TSM is in, let's talk about things here a little bit, because RLCS qualifier number 4, so the first one of split number 2 for EU was last weekend. Number 2 is this weekend for NA. We'll kind of get to dig in that a little bit here at the end, but I wanted to talk about last week for EU because, one, Carmine Corp out in top 8. We used to do a segment called Hot and Cold. I'm sure we'll bring it back here soon, here and there. And when I didn't have any idea what I was doing, and I was doing hot and colds for like months out in advance, one of the things that I asked you was if we were going to see Vatira be able to get to a month's worth of Championship Sunday, 30 of them things in a row. And I'm pretty sure with going out at top 8 here, he was at 28 of them. He has literally made Championship Sunday pretty well every event since he's been around, and went out on Saturday to an Oxygen squad that looked they look really darn good, Llama, with the roster change.
They look like the real deal. And I think to not only like say like they're looking good, but also I feel like that was a proving matchup. Like you talk about to try and move forward, move through one of the greatest of all time to ever touch the game. So I feel like you got to recognize Oxygen as possibly a real player, not only to win the region, but maybe even go forward and possibly do some good damage at the major. I mean, this is a team that like Jayo's got the experience. I feel like the team is going to be good together.
It's funny. I was trying to remember the content creator who I was watching, who went on this big old rant last split, and somebody was in their chat was like, "Joyo deserves better," and they're like, "What do you mean Joyo deserves better? This is a team game. This is what they meant by Joyo deserves better. Now on a roster that makes sense, that's making moves, and Joyo really gets to shine. I mean, you were a game away from going to the grand finals. You went to 7 games against Gentlemates. Is this maybe the ceiling while they're on a honeymoon phase? I don't know. I feel like though that we've at least seen flashes of, hey, you know what? Maybe the French four-headed horseman, or the French 4 horsemen, however you want to call it, is no longer like unbeatable. Oxygen has shown that they are worthy of being in that discussion. Can they make sure they earn themselves a spot to land number 2? Obviously, we still have 2 more qualifiers to tell.
Yeah, I mean, it feels like they've got to stay consistent. It feels like they're on the up and up, but it does feel like they are a danger to possibly some of these other teams that are looking for maybe an easier route on through. And I got to say, Europe's getting more exciting, even though we talk about Europe as this kind of more dominant region holding some nice world championship titles, some good little regional conflict, but it feels like this could be again one of the best splits for Europe to be like the most competitive.
Is Vitality back?
Maybe.
Because I feel like they weren't that far off in split 1, right? I mean, it was the Carmine Corp that was unbeatable online that took them out every time, I think, in split 1, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yeah, I think so.
So being just a step behind, obviously losing a coach like Farah going into the season would be a little bit of a step back. No, and that's not any discredit to their new coach, right? But just Farah has a proven track record, obviously has gone continued to prove so over with Carmine Corp. But I've seen people kind of bringing up the discussion. It's interesting to me seeing so many people hop on the board of Vitality is back, because in my opinion, I don't know if Vitality really ever left. I mean, they weren't the unbeatable team, but how long can you be an unbeatable team and anything really? You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, it feels like we need a little bit more from them. Like they're right there. They're so close. It feels like every single time, like you said, did end up losing to KC. And the tough thing is like, if you're losing again and again and again, are you actually that top team? If you're not able to adapt, if you're not able to learn and change up that matchup the next time you see them. So I feel like we need a little bit more. I feel like it could be here with this one or the next regional that they have to step up and show us. I think, like you said, they never left, but also they're not the foreground just yet. They need to show me a little bit more, Q.
I do think they had to show a little bit more. But I don't think they have too much more to prove. I think I have to agree. I think that they are definitely right there. Now, of course, also with the changes to Split 2, it's no longer where EU is the only region that has their main event the same weekend. We now have OCE and APAC on that weekend, although I don't know why they didn't split up those two, because they overlap. I don't make the rules. Anyways, I wanted to talk real quick because Power was able to win yet another regional qualifier, back to back now. And for Power, struggled a little bit in the early parts of, or not early parts. It just didn't look like they were quite the same dominant Power in the earlier part of the qualifier. But when push came to shove, both in the semifinal matchup with the Pioneers, who I do think gave Power their best competition of the weekend, as well as in the grand finals. Power was able to show up when it was needed. So it looks like Power one step forward to one, locking in their spot for Worlds, but also making sure that they're going back for Major 2.
They are. And honestly, I got to say, from seeing the regional four and seeing like their Swiss, that they kind of didn't necessarily, they got sixth. That wasn't the worst performance ever, but like it wasn't what I expected. I feel like everybody expecting them to maybe end in that 1-2 slot, or not even drop down to that 6 and not even have to go towards that 5th game. But at the same time, they proved it. They proved it in playoffs. They were able to prove it in Swiss, and they were able to win the games when it mattered most. And that's the most important thing, is winning the games when it matters most. And that's, like you said, that's the proof of a world champion, is those that can adapt.
It's how you can overcome the adversity, you know what I mean? And I feel like being able to weather the storm as well. We're kind of seeing that a little similar fashion with Elevate over in APAC as well, who is also able to win themselves another regional. It feels like APAC, it's interesting. I feel like APAC's kind of gotten to the point where it's really is like a team race. It's like Elevate, Gaiman Gladiators, and then it's literally everyone else.
Yeah.
But I do feel like that the matchup between Gaiman Gladiators and Elevate is interesting enough, with it being a region that only has one spot, that is still worth tuning into. You know what I mean?
It is. That's what we talked about kind of in previous segments as well. We're like, oh yeah, EU's very interesting because you've got like the battle with like some of the greatest teams in the entire world. It's very competitive, but like these other regions are really exciting too, because they only get that one slot. You only get one team to send towards. So if you don't have like one or two good qualifiers, all of a sudden you're done, you're out, and your day is gone.
So now we've got what? Qualifier 2. So qualifier 5 is this weekend for NA. Kind of curious, early thoughts. Do you expect much different from qualifier 4, or are you expecting it to pretty well be more than likely G2 Gen G in the grand finals? And if so, what are you taking there as far as who wins?
I just feel like G2 and Gen G, they have shown that they're a level above everyone else, not only throughout like multiple different stages, but I mean the last regional, whatever it's called as well, they showed that too. So I think that they are going to be 1-2, but I think it's going to be a little bit more spicy. I think that not only like Snowman being back in just adds an extra little bit of spice. I really love this team. I hope they get into their top 4 under their belt, and I would love to see this team going towards the major. At the same time, you talk about, there's a lot of just like wild card teams like TSM, who like didn't have the performance that they wanted, didn't make it towards that top 8 in the previous regional. They're a wild card. You talk about Cloud9, they're a wild card team. Spate is a wild card team to me. Snowman, TSM, I already said them, but Moist as well is one that's a wild card too. Like,
that middle pack is very, very interesting. And I think leading the middle of the pack, the team that I'm going to be like really looking forward to seeing how they do, especially during Swiss on Friday, is Space Station Gaming, because they've been the what would be the opposite of benefactor? They have kind of gotten the short end of the stick a few times once they got through Swiss and into the single elimination portion, where you're literally playing the 2 best teams in the region in that quarterfinal. Usually, they can put themselves in a position, get themselves through in that top 4 scenario where you're not playing them until Sunday.
right.
Get yourself them points, put yourself not only into Major 2, but also earn yourself a spot into Worlds as well. I think currently they're sitting like 5 points, I think, behind OG as far as overall points, as far as for that world spot. So it's definitely doable. OG, obviously, also in this Swiss bracket. So you have to make sure that you perform better than them to close the gap. But
yeah,
I really like the way that Space Station Gaming is looking right now.
I think Space Station, like nobody's really talking about them because it feels like you're talking about the big 2 names. You have to kind of mention them, that they look on the up and up. They look really good, and they're starting in that kind of a higher Swiss thing that they're playing NRG, which is like, you're like, okay, you're playing NRG. This should be a high level matchup, but NRG has definitely not matched that performance of some of these other top teams. So I feel like it could be NRG, maybe another wildcard team, but Space Station does have an opportunity to start really, really good out in the Swiss stage. And, you know, talking about teams that maybe don't have an opportunity, that have a little bit tougher matchups, I'm really excited about this BDW squad. Even though they got to play G2 first, I know you and me, we've seen Brock so many times in the Frost Weeklies, just like winning those things, shooting some good shots. So it'd be exciting to see this team.
Brock, and I believe we've seen Willis a few times in the Frost and Stride as well. An interesting team. Again, I always love seeing these rosters that aren't necessarily your consistent rosters, but are getting put together that shows the young talent in the
Yeah.
region. Last qualifier we had what was Clovariety getting turned into cold in that whole situation. This time BDW. I guess you could also kind of say the same thing with Netherlands. I was going to get it right the first time. This time, Netherlands Canada. There it is. And then, like you mentioned, also Spate having some player names that we've familiarized ourselves with over kind of the course of the last couple of months. I think NA is going to be a lot of fun to watch this weekend. I'm gonna try and tune in where I can. Unfortunately, it overlaps quite a bit with SSA, so obviously that's going to be my main priority. And then you and I, we're busy on Sunday as well, so I'm probably gonna have to watch back the VOD as far as that goes. And not only am I going to have to watch back the VODs on that, Llama, but this weekend, it's a busy, busy weekend. We've got playoffs for VCT. We're locking in our field. Playoffs? Playoffs? Just hope we can win a game. No, yeah, we've got playoffs here for VCT. We're locking in our top 3 from each region. Technically already done as far as over in Pacific. We just had to do seeding for our second and third place. But we're figuring out who's going to Shanghai. So as I mentioned, over in Pacific, we already have our top 3. PRX locked into that top 2 scenario. The other 2 that are going to be competing, T1 Gen G, they're the ones in that lower bracket, which means yet another major, no DRX from Pacific. What's your thoughts?
It's sad. I mean, I feel like it's kind of that short turnaround kind of got the better of them. They were a squad that I felt like everybody was looking at, that like they are the big face of that. I mean, DRX flag literally right here. Like they're the big face of that region, like across not only that, but other esports titles as well. So to see them not make it, it's a surprise, but at the same time, it's tough because like it's just like it's that short turnaround. I feel like got so many teams off guard.
I think also it shows the strength of the region right now. Like I feel like before it was like you had DRX, PRX, and then like everybody else was just kind of there, right? You now have teams like a Gen G who have proven that they are up towards the top of the region.
Yeah.
Even T1, you can argue, was close to being able to qualify, if I'm not mistaken, for Madrid. So another team that has proven at least a little bit of consistency this year. And of course, DRX had the roster changes, had a second wave of roster changes, if I'm not mistaken, not too long before the start of the season. Maybe DRX can turn things around as far as in the LCQ. I mean, that could be a fun run. Of course, if you look at where they sit right now, they are 4th, which would mean they're the logical sort of favorites for that LCQ spot. But nothing's guaranteed, right? And speaking of being, nothing being guaranteed, we're even seeing that in our other regions. EMEA playing right now. I'm not going to look at the score of the game because I'm afraid that I'm going to become blue, seeing that the blue wall has fallen. But we are seeing Carmine Corp doing pretty well. I do got to say in EMEA, I'm happy to see that Fnatic, that they are still alive for now.
Yeah.
I was kind of concerned. It was interesting that last year's playoffs grand finals was this year's knockout round, being Fnatic and Team Liquid. Again, showing kind of how that gap has been closed, and there are new teams that have inserted themselves in the race. I don't know why I put a T there. In the race, a la Carmine Corp as well as Team Heretics.
I really like Foot and I really like Team Heretics. I feel like these 2 teams are so much bring so much excitement, and that matchup is going to be so exciting as well. But to see kind of like the Fnatic comeback, like you said, that multiple games where they should have lost, they should not be here, but they're finding ways to come back. And it's really exciting to see a team that can step up towards these top contenders, and even in that comeback fashion. So I think it'll be a really interesting region, as you kind of talked about before we actually went live and talked about our podcast here today, was that it's not double elimination until you get towards that top 4. So for Team Liquid and for Na'Vi, they're out. There's no second chance.
Fraud watch for those 2. And with knowing that LCQ is the last chance, especially for a team like a Na'Vi, who I think a lot of people were expecting to be maybe second to Fnatic, giving Fnatic a push, forward this year. And now you have missed both lands. Your only chance being LCQ. Get my boy Artist out of here. I've been telling you that man to fraud all. No, I'm just kidding. He is no. But it is, I think it really does go to show like the rest of the region how good things have gotten. And it's made for some really fun Valorant to watch this year. Even now, I mean, Carmine Corp and Fnatic had a crazy comeback to take map number 1. They're close right now on map number 2. It's going to be a fun weekend of playoffs.
It for sure is. I'm really excited to see not only these playoffs, but also when North America starts up. I think North America getting pretty spicy. Yeah, America's, but it's getting spicy either way, and I'm kind of sad. No more.
Put some respect on South America's name. They're leading both groups right now. All right.
Yeah.
No, but for real, think about it, Llama. So in Americas, right at the beginning of the season, I think a lot of people were like, yeah, you lost Aspas, but Loud should still be pretty good, right? They're out of here. They're not going to Shanghai. You had Sentinels, who everyone was hyped about. Then they won Masters Madrid. They're not going to Shanghai. The super team, NRG, they're out of here. They're not going to Shanghai. And then you don't have to worry about putting your 9s up because Cloud9 getting put down by G2 in the knockout round. I feel like probably the 4 teams that were like the favorites of Americas going into the year, none of them are going to Shanghai. That's wild.
It's wild to me. And I was kind of like sad watching the Cloud9 game. Like I honestly thought it would at least be a 3-game series, that second map having to go into overtime to decide it. But at the same time, like they lost pretty bad in the first map. I believe it was Lotus and then Ascent. But at the same time, yeah, there's no double elimination. They're just gone. They're just out. Not only did Sentinels not perform in that kind of regular season, but Loud and Cloud9 both were teams that I felt like were going up and up and up. And you're talking about a G2 team that barely stuck into playoffs off of getting 3 wins. And now they're going up against Crew of all people, who, like we said, were like, we were talking all season long, like this should be, it should be an easy win. It's Crew. We got this, guys. And then just like everybody was losing to him.
Go on a run. No, yeah, Crew's been going on quite a bit of a run this year. It's funny. I thought that Crew had potential to get out of their group to be able to go to the preseason, or not the preseason tournament, but to be able to go to Madrid, which they did not. So for them to then in turn bounce back and hit the turnaround that they did coming down the home stretch this season, quite impressive for this Crew squad. And now for Crew, I would say of the top 4, I think you have the best matchup. Not that to discredit G2, because obviously Cloud9 did that too, and they fell. They're not going to Shanghai, so you don't want to do the same thing if you're Crew. But if I'm Crew, I think I would rather play G2 definitely than Leviathan, because we saw how that worked out last week. But even also over 100 Thieves. So I feel like Crew's in a spot. They're literally one series away from going to Shanghai. Crazy.
And at this point, all teams in North America, that is the situation you're in. You win one, you're going to Shanghai. You lose it, well, you still have another chance in that lower bracket. I know we haven't been doing hot and cold for a while, but I want to hear your kind of predictions on who you think at least the winner of North America's is going to be, because I feel like Crew's been looking really strong. Okay.
Like 100%. Like I think Lev struggled a little bit out of the gate, even when they were like winning. They weren't winning games like in this fashion that you would expect them to against team that you would expect them to, because of all the roster changes. I think even though NRG came in as like the super team to watch, I think Leviathan, it was like 1 and 1A, right? Like those were the 2 teams that really got put together. And, you lose to Cloud9 week number 1, and then like you looked all right against Sentinels, but you wondered if maybe that was a little bit of fall off on the Sentinels part in week number 2. And then you just kind of slowly crawl your way around. NRG, you beat up on them, but so did a lot of teams. But G2, you didn't exactly look like as dominant as you should have been. It's a team that's had a little bit of a wild ride, but it seems like down the home stretch, Leviathan in true form.
I think so too. I think it's interesting to see, because like we were talking about again at the beginning, we were thinking like, okay, who's going to be our third? We got Sentinels, right. We got Loud for sure. They're going. Maybe it's a Furia. Maybe we're locking them in. Maybe it's a Cloud9. No, it's neither of them. Crew and Leviathan have both looked really, really good, especially towards the end of the regular season. But if I'm taking a team to win it, I honestly think 100 Thieves look really good in form. I think this next matchup this weekend will be really telling how they can play against Leviathan. If they can win here, I feel like they have the momentum to carry it to the grand finals. And I think Boostio is the savior for North America. I'm just going to say it.
Look at this guy, the American, picking the North American team to win. Surprise, surprise. Yeah, I know. No, I mean, I do think if it's not Leviathan, I really do think that 100 Thieves is probably the team that walks away with it, which is so weird. As strong as Crew has been, I'm really not looking at them. It really feels like whoever wins between Leviathan and 100 Thieves, I guess that would be, I think that's Friday night, or is that Saturday? No, that's tonight.
Yeah,
Oh,
it's tonight.
Thursday night. Okay, so that's tonight here to watch. I'm gonna definitely have to make sure I tune in. I think the winner of that locks in the number 1 spot. And I think Crew beats G2. So that would mean that Leviathan, 100 Thieves, Crew are your 3 representatives. And I do believe that would guarantee that it will be the only region that has all new representation from LAN 1 to LAN 2.
Okay.
Well, I guess technically that's already guaranteed, I guess, with the top 4 being the way it is, but
yeah, but that is really exciting. And I think when you take a step back and you look at Crew and you're like, okay, yes, they are this 5-1 squad, but you look at kind of the group they had to play against. You played against a group that had 2-0-5 teams, 2 teams that had a goose egg throughout the regular season. So you just have to question a little bit the strength of the group Omega, and maybe it's that kind of same thing for Leviathan. Like maybe you had a little bit easier way through because you had other teams that were tanking the regular season games. But it'll be really exciting, and honestly, I want to see some upsets too. I'd really love to see G2 like bring it to Crew, bring it to some of these other teams, and maybe make a run.
You can discredit their strength of schedule. I could definitely see that, but 3 of the 5 teams in Group Alpha also went 500. Crew went 5-1. So I think definitely something to keep looking an eye on here moving forward. But I think here I am doing it. VCT Americas is going to be really, really fun to watch. I feel like again, the Leviathan 100 Thieves is probably of the 2 matchups tonight, the one that I'm more looking forward to. But that G2 Crew matchup that starts actually in 4 hours from when we're recording right now, just might be like a low key banger, like one of those that goes 3 and like everyone's like, when did these teams get so good? And it's just because we've been looking at literally everyone else. And there have been times that I think where Crew's winning and we're like, wow, they lost to Crew, instead of going, wow, Crew beat them. And it's weird how that inverse of thought kind of changes the perspective completely. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do gotta think it's gonna be exciting, and I think, like I said, that both these 2 teams, even though Crew did go 5-1, could possibly be a wild card to win it all and bring that record towards those playoffs. I gotta ask you though, Q, kind of looking a little bit way too far in the future for some of these teams like Fura, like MIBR, like Sentinels even. Are you looking to make a change already?
I don't think Sentinels is. I think Sentinels realizes some of their issues was, 1 with the bounce back, and 2. Can you say that when you're 3-3 and plus 21? It also kind of feels like maybe a little bit of a let's blame the format. I'm not a huge fan of doing that. You know what I mean? So I don't think Sentinels has to press the panic button just quite yet. The problem with VCT is, man, there is so much off season. What do you do with all that time? I feel like you almost are forced to, at minimum, dip your toe in the water to try and see if there's a better option that fits your roster out there. You run into this whole problem where if I start trying people out and then I then bring that 5th starter back because there's some sort of turmoil going in the new season. I think that's part of the reason why, one, I would really like to see a longer season, because for a team like NRG, who did not get to go to either LAN, what if they played 8 series?
Yeah.
And they're done? Yep. Well, they're not done. They're still LCQ. But you have 8 series for 2 LANs. And for LCQ, if you don't do that well, you're probably only going to get yourself another series or 2 anyway. You're telling me you might only play 10 or 11 series for even a thing like this that does go 7-8 months? Like, I don't know, bro.
It's really tough, and I think for these teams, like it's really tough to like dig yourself out of this position as well, right? Because like for Sentinels, okay, like you can stabilize a little bit, like you said, you found some of those issues, but for these other teams that haven't had good back-to-back performances, you're sitting there like, okay, now do we test people out? Where do we test them out? Scrims aren't going on. Everybody else is improving at a faster rate than us. And we're just going to keep having these problems. And that's what I'm a little bit scared about, is for like your NRGs, your Furious, 2 teams that we kind of had higher expectations, I feel like, heading into the regular season about. how do you dig yourself out of this grave? And is everybody else going to be too far ahead once you get out of that grave?
I mean, I think the problem for right now on NRG is you got to look at your ROI because that's an expensive roster,
That's
bro.
true.
And
Yeah, true.
esports ain't a very cheap industry to be in right now either. So I feel like if there's any rosters right now that's on the outside looking in, at least the heavy hitters, and I'm looking more particularly at Sentinels, NRG, even a Loud, although I do think I saw this morning Loud is making a move to their bench. I can't remember who it was that's
Okay.
getting moved to their bench, but it did say that that move was more based off of financials and performance. So
Interesting.
take that for what it is. They're very upfront about that,
Okay.
right? So of the heavy hitters of those three, or even if you look at let's say 100 Thieves, or I guess even Cloud9, since they did not make either major, I think Cloud9's close enough that you don't have to worry about it. And I would even say 100 Thieves, man. It's tough. It's
Yeah.
just where you're in an esport where your sample size before making a change isn't that big.
Hmm.
Um, I think if you're positive and such a tough region on your round differential, or not even just your round differential, I think you got to kind of take that as a positive.
Yeah, I think so too. And it is like you said, it's really tough. Like if you make that change, it could be a change for the worst, right? Like
Right.
it could be like, okay, maybe you are going for a rebuild year, but there are new players out there. You could go look for somebody new as well. So it is always that question of if you make this change, is it going to be for the better or for the worse? So it'll be exciting though. I really am excited for the rest of these playoffs and to see how the major does work out too. I'm excited to see all these teams from the different regions and see if North America can keep on winning.
The one thing I think that would help with not only VCT, but I think you could say across the board with esports when it comes to these longer off seasons would be if the pathway to pro from collegiate to pro
Yeah.
were truly established, because we're seeing the collegiate scene growing more and more. So the talent pool has to be there. Even
Oh
if
yeah.
we are only talking about going from one potential pro to five potential pros in all of these programs, that's still quite a few opportunities for these kids to maybe get some tryouts and stuff. So I think, and that's something that maybe we can kind of dig in. I've got an idea. I think I want to bring in a program manager to potentially talk about some collegiate esports over the
Yeah.
summer. Just a little hint that we'll drop a little nug. So if that's something you're looking forward to, if you haven't already done so, make sure you hit the subscribe button if you're watching over on YouTube. Also, make sure you're leaving us one of those the reviews and stuff on
Yeah.
the only audio versions and stuff once they start going up here as well. So make sure you're getting involved. But Llama, man, I think we found a way to cruise through this thing, and we actually still have like 10 minutes. So here's what I was thinking. I don't
Okay.
want to give Nick an easy job as far as
No,
editing
no.
this thing. So do we just riff it for 10 minutes and have him find a way to no, I'm just kidding. But is there anything that you want to chat about before we get up on out of here, my friend?
No, I kind of want to go back to your collegiate point, and not only might have the connection with the Hanuran, might be able to bring in Trey Shafari, who also is a League of Legends coach, but it is kind of more that pathway to pro you see in other esports more than Valorant. That like for League of Legends specifically, you see Marysville University, literally one of their players is on one of the teams that was playing in like the World Championships MSI, not the finals, but the championships. So it's cool to see that, but I think it's just not there for some of these other ones. And the scary thing we have to always talk about is like, you don't want pros being like, okay, I played my stint in pro. It's time to go back to collegiate and steal somebody's place.
Yeah, it's definitely a weird balance, and I have to agree. You have some titles that are showing that there's some balance there. I mean, we've talked quite a bit over the course of the last couple episodes, the CRL talent that has been in RLCS qualifiers and in main events, right? So I think we definitely see that there is a potential there. As it's becoming a growing industry, I hope it continues to be more focused around the students than it does become, being a business.
Yeah.
No. Bring it in. Yeah, I'm talking to you guys. Don't make it a business. It's all about the business, all about the students. And I got to say, man, honestly, not only just working in the collegiate scene, but you and I, we work in the scholastic scene as well. I feel like that's just where esports is its most fun. It's its purest form is where it's like, we're actually just more competing to compete versus like, I want to be the best in the world. You know what I mean? I want to be the best version of me versus being the best of everyone else. But I'm gonna be excited to see how these next couple of weeks play out. We're gonna figure out next week. We're gonna figure it out on the back end. We might have to have a episode come to y'all a little early because your boys got family in town. And then I'm moving the week after that. But we appreciate you guys for tuning in. Make sure every time you see the shorts come across, whether it's over on YouTube, the other social media platforms, you let that bad boy play through. You hit the like button, you leave a comment. Those are all the things that tell the different algorithms that they should be putting our content in front of more people. We appreciate y'all for that. And we appreciate y'all for sticking along and hanging out with us nerds talking about esports for 50 minutes. That's pretty freaking cool. This was episode number 11. We appreciate y'all for tuning in. We also kind of appreciate Nick for editing this thing as well. But until we get to catch y'all back here for the next one, man, don't forget, with everything crazy going on in the world today, be true, be you, be sincere, game hard and love hard. All right, y'all. That's Llama. I'm Q. For the rest of the crew from the front to the back, y'all have a great rest of your week. Peace.